Greetings, I'm Dr. Ileana Kwaski, and in this presentation, I'll be talking about motivating doctoral students. Over the next several minutes, we'll talk about what is motivation so we have a working definition. Talk about some theories of motivation, particularly as they apply to our role as a dissertation chair and understanding how to motivate our students. And then finally, I'll provide a few student examples of motivation issues I have encountered with dissertation students, as well as some recommended strategies to help them in their progress with the dissertation. So let's first talk about what is motivation. Motivation is what moves us from idea to action. It is often defined as an internal state moving to an external state, that is, behavior. So what is it that moves us from ideas to actions or behaviors? There are different theories on this. There are a number of theories of motivation, and it is important to understand what drives behavior, particularly if we want to serve to facilitate behaviors that will lead to the completion of the dissertation. I will briefly discuss a few motivational theories that can be considered when working with doctoral students, and then we'll refer back to them when I provide some student examples. The first theory I'm going to talk about is Vroom's expectancy theory. This is represented by the model presented here that assumes that given an individual's effort, the first variable you see there, certain performance will be achieved that will yield a specific outcome. Further explanation of this model is that the expectancy, which is the relationship between effort and performance, the expectancy is a probability that effort will lead to good performance. Instrumentality, the arrow between performance and outcome, is the probability that performance will lead to desired outcomes. And finally, the outcome has a value or valence that can be perceived as negative or positive by the individual. In this case, we're talking about the outcome being the completed dissertation, and that can be viewed as a positive or a negative if it's intimidating. So when we talk about the student examples, I'll discuss the different variables that can impact those probabilities that will affect the overall outcome. Latham and Locke's goal-setting theory is a well-recognized method of motivating individuals. In organizations, the underpinnings of systems such as management by objectives are based on goal-setting theory. As industrial organizational psychologists, we are taught to develop SMART goals, which are founded on Locke and Latham's goal-setting theory that to motivate employees, goals must have clarity, challenge, commitment, feedback, and task complexity. And relating these 5 aspects to the SMART acronym, goals must be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. As dissertation chairs, we should consider ensuring that our students have developed SMART goals. Adams' equity theory from the early 60s can also be used to explore factors that might improve motivation with our doctoral students. Adams' equity theory posits that employees, or students in this case, may become demotivated if they feel their inputs outweigh their outputs, or others' inputs outweigh outputs. When we talk about employees, the imbalance can be manifested in dissatisfaction with the work, reduced efforts, or in extreme cases, counterproductive behavior. As I will show in one of my examples, a student who believes his dissertation chair is not putting in the appropriate effort may become demotivated and discouraged and not produce the appropriate output. Finally, we can attempt to understand what drives students by using incentive theories. Here we can assist our students by helping them identify what factors drive them to progress in their dissertations. Are they extrinsic factors such as fame, position, or money? Or are they intrinsic factors, like they want to do a good job, this is self-fulfilling? So to talk about motivation issues and strategies to address them with doctoral students, I'm going to present 3 different student examples. First one I'm calling Life Happens. This is when the dissertation is the last on the priority list. The second example, Who's to Blame, is when the goals are not met and the student defers responsibility to the chair, or other factors for that matter. And third, it's impossible. This is when the student continues to face obstacles, which impedes progress in their dissertations. In the first example, what I'm calling life happens, I'm coaching a student who is working for a company that I consult to right now. She's a doctoral student who is struggling with work-life balance. She doesn't need the doctorate to work in the consulting firm and to be successful. She has a baby on the way, and they just moved into a new home. So she has a lot on her plate and is having a difficult time balancing work and life and the dissertation, which has fallen to the bottom of the priority list. She came to me to coach her to help her make progress in her dissertation. So with this student, these are a couple of strategies that we've talked about to help her increase motivation. As an IO psychologist, she can actually appreciate some of the different motivational theories, and we've talked about them as they apply to her particular situation. So we can start with Vroom's expectancy model, efforts leading to performance leading to outcome. We can look at how to increase the value of the outcome. As I mentioned, the completion of the dissertation has dropped to the priority list. The fact is she doesn't need it. So right now, the outcome in terms of its valence, its value, is rather low. So what can she do, or how can she perceive completing the dissertation as something more valuable? So how can we, and me as her coach, adjust her valence to increase the value of the dissertation so that can be something that she looks forward to? We can talk about also increasing the probability of her being able to achieve the outcome. So the relationship, the instrumentality between performance and outcome. Are there any barriers that she's encountered? So this person has a lot on her plate. Does she have time when she's home to work on her dissertation? Perhaps helping her examine how she's managing her time to make it feasible to achieve outcomes. So in her case, she's had to carve out time. She goes to the library to get some time when her husband's home to watch her children so that she can sit and focus on her dissertation. And then we can go back to the goal-setting theory and making sure that the goals that she set for herself are realistic, they're attainable, and that she's holding herself accountable for them, that they're done in a timely way. In the next example, who's to blame? This was a student who I served on his committee as a reader, but I was also at the time the chair of the department, and he came to me with feedback about his dissertation chair. He was blaming her for not giving him enough direction. He had submitted a poor draft of his literature review with a bunch of holes. I actually reviewed his literature review just to evaluate whether his dissertation chair was providing adequate feedback, and certainly she was, and she was giving him timely feedback. He just wasn't doing the work. So he believed that she was not doing her share of the work by not telling him what other articles to read. This is very similar to the example that we had in class on the discussion board. So how do we address this? Going back to the theories of motivation that I discussed prior, we can apply Adams' equity theory to this particular student example. In this example, the student does not believe that the outputs of the chair are appropriate for his inputs. So he's reduced his inputs and has submitted less than stellar work. So in this case, it's helpful to, first of all, clarify expectations. Following this theory, we want to look at the inputs and outputs of both the student and the dissertation chair. And in this case, the student's understanding of what the outputs are for the dissertation chair were not well aligned. So going back and having the dissertation chair discuss what kind of feedback she would be providing, that she knows she's not to be providing all of the articles that he needs to be reviewing. That is his responsibility, making all of that clear is essential so that he can continue being motivated, that this is really his job. This is his job to do that, not hers. So I worked with him and her in discussing those issues with him. Another aspect to this is to reestablish trust. He has to believe that what she is doing in terms of giving him feedback and her actions as they progress in the dissertation process are in his best interest and are appropriate in her role as chair. And so that is something that they both have to work on in improving their communication and improving their trust. We can also talk about goal setting with this particular student, establishing the SMART goals, making sure this particular student is being held accountable, and that he's the one who needs to be setting the goals, and then making sure that he meets them. The chair is there to help support the student and provide some structure, but the fact is that these goals have to be self-driven, and that it's the student who needs to set them, which goes back to clarifying expectations and improving communication. Finally, the last example, it's impossible. The student has designed a study that requires participation from external organizations. He becomes discouraged because several organizations have not responded to his request. He does not have enough participants in his study, and he is not progressing as quickly as he would want. Here, the student doesn't think it's possible to complete the dissertation. I had a student such as this. We can apply different strategies to increase motivation, and we can go back to, again, goal-setting theory. As a chair, you might want to discuss with the student, are the goals for the study realistic? How many subjects do you really need for this particular study based on your design? Is your design something that's realistic that can be done within the time frame? Are the goals for the study realistic? How many organizations do you need? In my student's case, it was a qualitative study, and he wanted to gather participants from a wide range of organizations. But in reality, we were able to get enough participants from one organization to have a very solid study. One can also apply expectancy theory here by looking at where are the impediments to performance. So in my student's case, what was keeping him from performing? He had put in the effort by contacting a wide range of organizations, but they hadn't responded to him, so he couldn't perform, he couldn't conduct his analysis, he couldn't interview his subjects. So how as a chair can we help that? How can we remove those barriers to increase the probability to perform, and finally to increase the probability to achieve the outcome, which inevitably is the completion of the dissertation? In conclusion, each student has a unique set of circumstances. One of our responsibilities as dissertation chair is to help the student identify what factors may be inhibiting his or her performance and provide strategies to increase motivation so that, again, they can achieve what is the final outcome, which is the completion of the dissertation. Hopefully in the course of this presentation, you have acquired some strategies to help your students do that. For further reading about motivational strategies, please see the following references.